"This baby isn't mine," the Lycan king screamed. But he scented his own blood on the child and froze. The twilight sky bled into shades of deep violet and silver as the forest whispered secrets through the rustling of its ancient trees. Shadows danced across the ground, twisting and curling like living things. Somewhere far beyond the thick walls of the Lycan king's stronghold, a child cried, a sound that seemed too small, too fragile for the vast, wild world. King Calvaro stood atop the highest tower of his castle, staring at the horizon. His eyes, sharp and golden under the dimming sun, were fixed on nothing and everything at once. The kingdom was quiet, almost eerily so, and yet Cale could feel the tension in the air, as if some unseen thread had been tugged in the world's delicate web. A chill ran through him, the kind that comes not from the cold but from instinct. He could smell it before he saw it, the faintest trace of blood, mingled with the sweetness of something innocent and new. His nostrils flared. He was not a king known for fear. He was a Lycan, a ruler with claws and fangs and power that bent men and beasts alike to his will. Yet the scent pulled at him like a tide he could not resist. Cale left the tower without a word, moving silently through the castle halls. The servants dared not look him in the eye. The king's presence was like a shadow that fell over all. He descended the winding stairs to the courtyard and passed through the great wooden gates that groaned under their own weight. Beyond, the forest stretched dark and alive, waiting for him. The crying grew louder, a small, desperate sound that broke Cale's stoic mask. He followed it, guided by the scent of blood that was both foreign and familiar. And then he saw the child. Wrapped in a threadbare blanket, the baby lay in the hollow of an ancient oak tree, shivering, eyes wide with fear and wonder. Cale's breath caught. The scent of the child was unmistakable, his own blood, subtle yet undeniable, lingering in the infant's veins. Cale knelt, the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions pressing on his shoulders. His claws were retracted, his human form taking over as he gently lifted the child into his arms. The child's skin was soft, warm, and alive. The baby reached up instinctively, tiny fingers curling around Cale's thumb. This cannot be," Cale murmured, his voice almost a whisper to the forest. He could not understand how it was possible. His blood, his own, flowed in this child. But he remembered no union, no choice that would have led to this. His heart pounded with confusion, dread, and a strange, unfamiliar tenderness. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a faint echo of a woman's voice, soft, haunting, and familiar. Cale's eyes narrowed. He remembered a moment, fleeting and secret, a shadow of memory that had been buried beneath years of duty and control. And now it stood before him in the form of this child. He could not yet name the feelings the child stirred in him, fear, hope, longing, but he knew one thing. The child was his responsibility, whether he wanted it or not. Cale carried the baby back to the castle, moving swiftly and silently, shadows bending around him as if the night itself was part of his command. The castle gates closed behind him, and inside, the warmth of firelight clashed with the cold reality of his discovery. In the great hall, the servants paused, frozen in mid-motion. Cale's gaze swept over them like a blade. None dared speak. The child rested in his arms, eyes blinking, taking in the grandeur of the hall with the wide-eyed wonder of someone too young to understand what power surrounded them. Cale placed the child in a cradle near the fire. It was an ornate cradle, carved with the symbols of his lineage, yet it felt strangely empty, as though it had waited for this very moment. The baby yawned and curled its tiny hands, and Cale felt a lump rise in his throat. "Who would leave a child here?" he murmured, though he knew the answer would not come so easily. The forest whispered secrets again, and Cale knew there were eyes upon them, watching, waiting. The kingdom's peace was fragile, and news of this child could spark storms that even his strength might not contain. Footsteps echoed in the hall, soft but deliberate. Cale turned, senses alert, claws ready even in their retracted form. A figure stepped forward, Selara the queen. Her presence was a shock to the stillness, her eyes sharp, assessing and full of unspoken questions. She stopped just short of the cradle, her gaze falling on the child. Kale's grip on his composure tightened. "This child came to us," he said simply, though every word felt heavy with meaning. Selara's brow furrowed. "And who would leave a child in the forest under your protection, King Kale? Do you know what rumors will follow?" Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of accusation and concern intertwined. Kale looked at her, golden eyes meeting silver. "I do not care for rumors," he said. "The child is here. That is enough. Nothing else matters." Selara's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the baby, then back at Kale. "This child is not ordinary. You smell it too, do you not?" Kale's eyes flicked toward her, wary. "Yes," he admitted, "and yet it smells of me." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Selara's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment silence filled the hall, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The child stirred, small fingers reaching out instinctively. Kale felt a strange warmth spread through him, a protective instinct he had never known in his life of battles and rulership. The forest's distant whispers seemed to quiet in reverence, as if acknowledging that a new destiny had begun. Selara stepped closer, though her hands remained clasped at her waist. "King Kale, if the child is yours, if your blood runs through these tiny veins, then what are we to do?" Her voice was soft, almost afraid, yet it carried the weight of a queen's authority. Kale knelt beside the cradle, his face shadowed but resolute. "We protect it. Whatever comes, whatever dangers lie ahead, we will protect this child." He did not speak of the fear that gripped him, the fear of failing, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of what this revelation could mean for him and for the kingdom. Nor did he speak of the longing that had awakened in him, a longing for something pure and innocent in a life filled with duty and darkness. The child blinked at him, eyes reflecting the flickering firelight, and in that instant Kale felt a bond that could not be broken by words or reason. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it a scent unfamiliar yet ancient. Kale's ears twitched, instincts sharpening. The forest had secrets, and the child had already begun to stir them. "Someone is coming," Selara said, her voice tense. Her hand brushed against the edge of the cradle, protective and hesitant all at once. "We are not alone in knowing this child exists." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then we will face them together." He glanced down at the child, whose tiny chest rose and fell in the rhythm of innocent sleep. "Whatever it takes, this child will not be harmed." The shadows in the hall seemed to deepen, curling around the columns like silent witnesses. And in the quiet, the child's eyes flickered, a golden hue that glowed faintly in the firelight. Kale froze, a shiver crawling down his spine. The scent of his own blood mingled with something ancient, something powerful. A whisper of a name, soft, haunting, slipped through the air, brushing against his ears. He caught it barely, yet it resonated deep within him, echoing truths he had not dared to speak. The child stirred, and the firelight danced in their eyes. Kale's heart clenched with a mixture of fear, awe, and something he could not yet name. "Prophecy," he whispered to himself, voice rough, almost lost in the crackle of the flames. "It begins now." Outside, the forest held its breath. The wind ceased. The shadows waited. And the Lycan king, for the first time in his long, controlled life, felt powerless, not against an enemy, but against the bond forming between a father and his child, against the pull of fate, against a destiny that would change everything. Kale looked down at the child once more, golden eyes meeting brown, innocent ones. The baby gurgled softly, reaching out again, and the king's resolve hardened. No matter the danger, no matter the curse or the enemy, no matter the secrets yet to be uncovered, he would guard this child with everything he was. And yet, deep inside, a whisper of fear lingered. The child was not just his, they were the key to something greater, something ancient, and perhaps something dark. The castle's great doors creaked open behind him. Footsteps echoed. Kale stiffened. The night had begun, and with it, the threads of destiny were being woven into a tapestry none could yet see in full. The castle was unusually quiet the morning after the child's arrival. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting golden patterns on the stone floors. Yet the calm was deceptive. Kale Varro, the Lycan king, could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him. His mind was restless, turning over the questions that had not yet answers. Selara, the queen, moved through the castle with measured grace, her silver gown trailing behind her. She had watched Kale all night, her thoughts tangled with worry, suspicion, and something she could not name. She did not fully understand the child, but she could sense the danger that accompanied its presence. When she entered the great hall, she found Kale standing over the cradle, silent and unmoving. The child's small hands clutched the edge of the blanket, tiny fingers curling and uncurling in rhythm with soft, uncertain breaths. "The child stirs again," Selara said softly, careful not to startle either king or child. "It will not remain hidden for long if it continues to cry." Kale did not turn immediately. His golden eyes remained fixed on the child, reading the tiny face as if searching for answers written in its innocence. "It is more than just a child," he murmured. "I feel it in my blood. Something powerful stirs in it." Selara stepped closer, her voice cautious. "Powerful, yes, but dangerous. Even you, Kale, may not be able to control it. Do you not see what this could mean for our kingdom?" Kale finally met her gaze. There was tension in his posture, a tightness that spoke of restraint. "I am aware," he said quietly, "and yet I cannot leave it. It is mine to protect, whether the world understands or not." Selara's silver eyes narrowed slightly. "Yours, or are you speaking only of your blood? You do not know if this child will bring salvation or ruin." Kale's jaw tightened, and for a moment the distance between them felt greater than the wide corridors of the castle. "I know one thing," he said firmly. "No harm will come to it while I draw breath. I will not allow it." The child stirred again, letting out a small, almost musical gurgle. Kale's eyes softened as he lifted it slightly from the cradle. The warmth of its tiny body against his chest was both comforting and terrifying. He did not know how he could care so deeply for something so small, yet the bond was undeniable. Selara watched him, her heart tightening in ways she did not fully understand. There had been times in the early years of their marriage when she had seen Kale's softer side, rare glimpses that were always hidden behind the weight of his responsibilities. But now, before her, he was unguarded, vulnerable in ways that both frightened and fascinated her. "You speak as if the child is a prophecy," she said quietly. "Do you believe it truly is?" Kale's golden gaze returned to the small face nestled in his hands. "I do not know yet," he admitted, "but there is something familiar. Something old like a memory waiting to be remembered, and it calls to me." Selara stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of the cradle. "Then we must prepare," she said, her voice steady, though her mind raced. "We cannot allow anyone to take it. There are those in the forest who would use the child for their own gain, dark forces that hunger for power. Do you not feel it?" Kale's eyes narrowed, instincts flaring. "I feel it," he said, his voice low and commanding, "and I will face it. I will face all who threaten this child." Selara's hand hovered over the child, her own protective instincts awakening. "And if you cannot, if something beyond even your strength comes for it?" Kale's eyes met hers, a storm of emotion hidden behind a mask of control. "Then I will fight until my last breath. And you, Selara, you will stand with me, will you not?" The queen's breath caught. She had not expected such intensity, such raw determination. Yet in that moment she knew she would not hesitate. She would protect the child and Kale, even if it meant facing forces that had long been hidden in shadow. The first knock on the castle doors came in the late afternoon. Kale's ears twitched, sensing more than the ordinary. The servant who opened the door stepped back, bowing, as a cloaked figure entered. The figure's presence seemed to darken the room, the air thick with the scent of the unknown. "Your Majesty," the figure said, bowing, "I bring word from the northern villages. Strange events have been seen in the forests near the borders. Fires without source, animals acting strangely, and whispers that speak of a child with a royal scent." Kale's eyes narrowed. "And these whispers, what do they say?" "They speak of a child of power, Your Majesty," the figure replied. "A child whose blood could change the fate of the kingdom if it falls into the wrong hands." Kale exchanged a glance with Selara. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together. "Then we must act swiftly," Kale said, voice steady though his heart beat faster. "The child must not be found by those who would use it. Not now, not ever." The cloaked figure bowed again and left. Silence returned to the hall, but it was heavier now, filled with unspoken fears and possibilities. Selara's hand rested lightly on the cradle. "The child is not just a threat," she said softly. "It is a hope, perhaps the hope we have waited for. But that hope will draw danger, Kale. Even you cannot fight everything." Kale looked down at the child, small and unaware of the weight it carried. "Then I will not fight alone," he said. "You will stand with me, Selara. Together we will protect it." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the tension between them almost tangible. Selara could see the struggle within him, the fear, the longing, and the fierce protectiveness that no royal duty could suppress. The evening shadows crept along the walls as Kale carried the child to the upper chambers, a private room prepared for its care. Selara followed, silent, her mind racing with the implications of this new presence in the castle. The child's small hands clutched at Kale's cloak as if recognizing the safety and strength within him. As Kale laid the child in the cradle, he noticed a faint glow in its eyes, golden and fleeting. He froze, heart hammering. Something about the child was not ordinary. Something ancient, almost forgotten, stirred within it. Selara leaned closer, whispering, "Kale, do you see it?" Kale nodded slowly. "Yes, it is as if the child carries a part of our past and perhaps our future, but I do not yet understand." The night deepened and the castle grew still. Kale sat beside the cradle, watching the child sleep. Thoughts of duty, power, and fear warred with feelings he had long suppressed: love, longing, and the desire to protect something truly innocent. Outside, the forest whispered again. Shadows shifted. Eyes unseen watched the castle, drawn by the child's presence. Kale's ears twitched. Danger was approaching even now. Selara joined him, standing quietly, her hand brushing his shoulder. "We must be ready," she said. "Not just for those who seek the child, but for what the child will bring. There is a prophecy, Kale, I can feel it, and it begins with this child." Kale looked down at the tiny face, golden eyes flickering with life. "Then we will face it," he said firmly. "Whatever comes, we will face it together. And the child will never be alone." A sudden sound interrupted their thoughts, a soft, musical whisper that seemed to float through the air. The child's eyes opened, glowing faintly golden. Kale froze, sensing the truth of the words that were not spoken aloud. The child had called him, named him, connected to a destiny older than the kingdom itself. Selara gasped softly. "It knows you," she said, voice trembling with awe. "It calls to you. Do you hear it?" Kale's hand rested protectively on the child, his mind racing. "Yes," he said, voice low and certain, "and I will not ignore it. Whatever path this child is meant to walk, I will walk with it." The shadows in the room seemed to lean closer, the firelight flickering in acknowledgement. Outside, the winds shifted, carrying with them the faintest hint of voices, whispers, and ancient power. The child's fate and that of the kingdom was beginning to unfold, and there was no turning back. Kale rose, carrying the child to the balcony that overlooked the forest. Selara followed, her hand lightly resting on his arm. "We must trust each other," she said softly. "No matter the danger, no matter the secrets. This child is ours to protect and perhaps ours to understand. Kale nodded, golden eyes scanning the horizon. The forest stretched endlessly, alive with hidden eyes and untold dangers. Then we will face it, he said, voice unwavering. Together, always together. And far in the distance, beyond the reach of firelight and stone walls, something stirred. Shadows shifted, and a faint, haunting whisper carried through the trees, a warning, a challenge, and a promise. The child's destiny had begun, and the world would never be the same. The night was heavier than usual, thick with mist that clung to the trees like a ghostly veil. In the forest beyond the castle, unseen forces stirred, drawn by the child whose golden eyes had already whispered the Lycan king's name. Kale Varro, standing at the balcony with the child cradled in his arms, felt the pull of destiny like a rope around his chest. He did not flinch, though his claws itched beneath his skin. Solara joined him silently, her hand brushing his arm. "They are coming," she said quietly. "I can feel it, dark forces, ones that have waited long for this child." Kale's jaw tightened. "Let them come. I will not let them take what is mine to protect." His voice was low, controlled, but underneath it, a current of fear swirled, one that only he and Solara could feel. The child stirred in his arms, soft coos breaking the heavy silence. Kale looked down, and the glow in its eyes flickered like firelight. It was not ordinary light. It was power, alive and ancient. And Kale knew, somehow, that this small being held the key to breaking a curse older than the castle walls, a curse tied to his bloodline. Suddenly, a rustling came from the forest, sharp and unnatural. Kale's ears twitched, and he moved swiftly, stepping onto the balcony's edge with grace born of centuries of instinct. Shadows leapt between the trees, and figures emerged, creatures of twisted shape and dark intent. "Stay inside," he commanded, voice sharp. Solara stepped back, hands pressed against the child as Kale shifted into his lichen form, golden fur bristling and claws gleaming in the moonlight. His roar split the night, a warning and a promise in one. The creatures hesitated, their shadows trembling. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, they surged forward. Kale met them with strength and precision, every movement a balance of control and raw power. Yet, even as he fought, his thoughts remained with the child in Solara's arms. Protecting it was no longer a choice. It was survival for both the child and the kingdom. After what felt like an eternity, the attackers vanished into the night, leaving silence and the smell of burned earth behind. Kale, panting but unbroken, returned to the castle's balcony. Solara held the child close, eyes wide. "They were strong," she said softly, her voice trembling. "What were they?" Kale looked down at the small, innocent face of the child and then back toward the dark forest. "They were shadows," he said grimly. "Servants of the curse that has haunted my bloodline for generations. They want the child because the child can undo what I have failed to fix." Solara's eyes filled with concern. "And if they take it, if we fail?" Kale's fingers tightened around the balcony railing, knuckles white beneath his fur. "Then I would rather die protecting it than live knowing I abandoned it. This is not just about blood, Solara. This is about redemption. For me, for my ancestors, and for the child." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Solara stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "Then we will face it together," she said. "I will not let you bear this alone." Kale met her gaze, golden eyes locking with silver. In that moment, he saw not just the queen but the woman who had been at his side through battles and betrayals, the one whose loyalty had never wavered. And beneath that loyalty, he felt a pulse of something more: trust, understanding, and a bond forged in fire and shadow. They spent the rest of the night preparing. The castle's walls were reinforced, wards were placed, and trusted guards were briefed. Yet Kale knew it was not enough. This threat was unlike any he had faced. It was not simply a matter of strength. It was tied to fate, magic, and the power that pulsed in the child's veins. Hours passed and dawn broke, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gold. The forest seemed quieter now, but the tension remained. Kale could feel it in the air, in the heartbeat of the castle, and even in the small breaths of the child sleeping peacefully in Selara's arms. "Kale," Selara whispered, as they stood together in the nursery, "the child, it is more than just blood. It carries hope. And perhaps forgiveness, not just for you but for all who have suffered because of the curse." Kale knelt beside the cradle, brushing a stray lock of hair from the child's face. "I cannot fail," he said quietly. "If I do, everything my family has done, everything I have done, it will be lost." His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. The child's innocence was a mirror to his own hidden vulnerabilities, and it terrified him. Selara reached out, placing a hand over his. "You are not alone, and the child is stronger than we realize. It carries the light of what we have longed for. Trust in it, Kale, trust in us." For a moment, Kale allowed himself to breathe, to feel the warmth of her hand and the gentle rhythm of the child's heartbeat. But the calm did not last. A sudden, chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and leaving only the soft glow of the child's eyes. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, and a voice, low and cruel, whispered through the chamber. "Give me the child, Kale Varro, or all you love will be lost." Kale's claws extended instinctively, his fur bristling. Selara stepped in front of the cradle, protective and determined. "We will not," she said firmly. The shadows writhed, forming shapes that were both familiar and terrifying. A figure emerged, a spirit, twisted by anger and greed, its eyes gleaming with ancient malice. Kale recognized it immediately. It was a corrupted ancestor, a Lycan whose hunger for power had cursed the bloodline for generations. "You should not have returned," the spirit hissed. "This child is mine by right. Its power belongs to the darkness." Kale rose to his full height, towering over the specter, his golden eyes blazing with determination. "No, the child belongs to the future, not your greed. I will not allow you to harm it." Selara stood beside him, her silver eyes shining with courage. "You are nothing compared to what we protect," she said. The spirit laughed, a sound that sent shivers through the walls. "We shall see." The air crackled with tension as the room filled with energy, magic, and the weight of generations. The child stirred, eyes glowing golden, as if sensing the confrontation. Kale knew in that instant that the child's power was awakening. It was not yet fully formed, but it pulsed with potential, and even the dark spirit could not ignore it. Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding and unyielding. "I will face you," he said. "Not for power, not for revenge, but for redemption, for my failures, and for this child." The spirit hesitated, sensing the truth in his words. Kale's voice carried more than strength. It carried the weight of remorse, love, and unwavering determination. For the first time, the spirit faltered. Selara placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "You are not alone," she whispered. "We are stronger together. Trust in us, trust in the child." The child cooed softly, golden light flaring briefly. The spirit shrank back, its form wavering. Kale realized then that the child's power was not only in its blood, but in the bond it shared with those who protected it. Love, trust, and courage were just as powerful as claws, fangs, and ancient magic. The spirit let out a scream of frustration, dissolving into shadows that retreated into the forest. The wind calmed, the room brightened, and for the first time Kale allowed himself to relax, if only slightly. Selara knelt beside the cradle, brushing the child's hair gently. "It is safe for now," she said. Kale looked at her, gratitude and something deeper in his eyes. "Not for long," he said softly. "This is only the beginning. There are more who will come, drawn by the child's power, but we will face them, Selara, together." The queen nodded, her hand finding his again. "Together," she said. Kale rose, carrying the child to the balcony once more. He gazed at the horizon where the forest stretched endlessly, shadows moving even in the daylight. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with trials and truths long buried. But Kale knew one thing: he would not falter. The child's destiny and his own redemption were intertwined, and as the first rays of sunlight touched the castle towers, a distant howl echoed through the forest, a reminder that darkness never fully sleeps. But for now the child slept, golden eyes closed, protected by love, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a father, a queen, and the hope of a kingdom. The forest beyond the castle had grown restless. Shadows shifted in ways that made the trees themselves seem alive. Kale Varro, the Lycan king, held the child close, feeling the pulse of its small heart against his chest. The golden glow in its eyes had grown stronger with each passing day, a quiet, powerful signal that the child's destiny was awakening. Solara stood beside him, silver eyes scanning the horizon. "We cannot wait for them to come," she said softly. "They will not stop, not until they have taken the child." Kale's jaw tightened, golden eyes sharp. "Then we go to them," he said. "To the cursed lands where the shadows rise. The child's power calls to something old and dangerous, and I will not let it be used for harm." The queen placed a hand on his arm. "Kale, the journey will be perilous. There are forces there that have haunted your bloodline for centuries. Even you may not be enough." Kale looked down at the child, cradled against his chest, and felt a surge of determination. "Then I will face them," he said quietly. "Not for power, not for vengeance, but for redemption, for this child, and for the future of our kingdom." Solara nodded, her expression both worried and resolute. "Then we leave at once." They rode through the forest under the fading moonlight, shadows curling around them like living fingers. Kale's senses were heightened, every sound, every movement a signal of potential danger. Yet the child slept peacefully, unaware of the weight it carried, and in that innocence Kale found a strength he had not known he possessed. As they approached the cursed lands, the air grew thick and heavy. Trees twisted unnaturally, and the ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet. Solara's hand rested lightly on the child's blanket. "Kale, do you feel it?" she whispered. Kale's ears twitched, nostrils flaring. "Yes," he said. "It is the shadow of our past, the darkness that my ancestors left behind. But it will not claim this child, not while I draw breath." The first figure appeared without warning. A wraith of shadow with eyes like burning coals moved toward them with unnatural speed. Kale shifted instantly into his Lycan form, muscles coiling like springs, golden fur bristling. The wraith lunged, and Kale met it with precision, claws striking, eyes glowing with fierce determination. Solara stepped beside him, chanting softly, a protective spell she had learned from the old royal texts. Light shimmered around the child, a barrier that made the shadow hesitate. Kale struck again, and the wraith dissolved into mist, retreating into the darkness. But they did not have time to rest. Figures emerged from every shadow, a horde of spirits twisted by greed and old magic. Kale fought with strength and skill, each movement a combination of instinct and power. Solara protected the child, her spells flaring in the air, light clashing against shadow in a dance of survival. Amid the battle, Kale felt something stir within the child. The golden glow flared brighter, and the air hummed with energy. He realized then that the child's power was awakening in response to the threat. It was not yet fully understood, but even partially awakened, it was enough to tip the balance. A massive shadow emerged, larger and darker than the rest. Kale recognized it immediately, the corrupted ancestor, the Lycan whose greed and malice had cursed their bloodline for centuries. Its eyes glowed with hatred. "You should have left it," the spirit hissed. "This child is mine," Kale growled, baring his fangs. "Never," he shouted. "I will not let you harm what is innocent. I will not let you undo what should be healed." Solara's hand rested lightly on Kale's arm. "Now, Kale, trust the child, trust us." Kale nodded, and together they created a circle around the child, their combined strength forming a protective barrier. The spirit struck, shadow against light, claws against magic. The child stirred, tiny hands reaching outward, and a pulse of golden energy shot from it, striking the corrupted Lycan squarely. The spirit screamed, its form flickering as the light burned through the darkness that had bound it for centuries. Kale seized the moment, rushing forward. "This ends now," he roared, driving the spirit back with strength born not of anger, but of love, protection, and the desire to redeem his family's past. The child's golden glow flared again, and the shadowed ancestor let out a final, ear-splitting scream before dissipating completely into nothingness. Silence fell over the cursed lands. The air was lighter, the oppressive feeling lifted. Kale stood over the child, golden fur bristling, panting from exertion but unbroken. Solara knelt beside him, brushing the sweat from his brow. "It is done," she whispered. "The curse, it is broken." Kale looked down at the child, whose tiny eyes now held a calm, deep glow, as if understanding everything that had happened. "Yes," he said quietly, voice heavy with emotion. "It is done because of this child, and because we chose to protect it together." Solara smiled softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You have done more than protect the child, Kale. You have faced your own fears, your past, and found redemption." Kale lowered his head, resting it lightly against hers. "I could not have done it without you," he admitted. "And I could not have done it without the child. It has changed everything, changed me." The forest around them seemed to sigh, as if the land itself recognized the balance restored. Light broke through the mist, touching the trees and the ground, golden and soft. The cursed lands no longer felt hostile, but alive in harmony. Kale lifted the child gently, holding it against his chest. The golden eyes blinked slowly, calm and trusting. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a quiet joy and peace he had not known in decades. The child's power was no longer a threat, it was a promise, a hope for the future. Solara stood beside him, hands entwined with his. "We are not just survivors," she said softly. "We are protectors, and the kingdom will thrive because of what we have done." Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. The path ahead would still be filled with challenges, but the heaviest burden had been lifted. The darkness that had haunted his bloodline had been faced, and the light had returned through the child, through trust, courage, and love. Together they returned to the castle, the child safe in Kale's arms. The journey back was quiet, filled with unspoken gratitude, relief, and the gentle warmth of a bond strengthened by trials and courage. When they reached the castle, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. The golden light reflected off the walls, painting the stone in warmth and hope. Kale carried the child to the nursery, placing it gently in the cradle. Solara knelt beside them. "The kingdom is safe," she said softly, "for now at least, but more importantly, we have found ourselves along the way." Kale nodded, a rare smile breaking across his face. "Yes," he said quietly, "we have found ourselves and a future worth protecting. And we have learned that redemption is not given, it is earned, through courage, love, and choice." The child stirred, tiny hands reaching out instinctively, curling around Kale's finger. The king's heart swelled, and he realized that the bond he had feared might overwhelm him was now a source of strength. The child's innocence, power, and trust were more than a responsibility. They were a reminder of all that was worth fighting for. Solara's hand rested gently on Kale's shoulder. "You have faced the darkness," she said, "and the light has returned, not just to the kingdom but to you." Kale looked down at the child, then at Solara, then to the horizon where the first birds were beginning their morning song. "Yes," he said, voice steady, full of resolve, "and I will protect this light, I will protect them, always." The child yawned, stretching tiny arms, golden eyes glimmering with quiet power. Kale and Solara exchanged a glance, both understanding without words that their lives had changed forever. They had faced fear, darkness, and the weight of history, and emerged stronger, bound by courage, love, and destiny. Outside the castle, the forest was calm. The shadows had receded, the winds whispered softly, and life returned to the land. The Lycan King, the Queen, and the child stood at the heart of it all, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, hope, redemption, and love could prevail. Kale rested his head lightly against Solara's, his golden eyes still scanning the horizon. The child stirred again, smiling faintly, as if understanding that their journey was only just beginning. But for now, the greatest battle was won. And the Lycan King's heart, once heavy with guilt and fear, was finally at peace.